You want to know who is at fault for all of these economic woes? It is, in fact, these corporations.
The World Economic Forum is synonymous with the agenda of the global capitalist class. Every year, around 3,000 of the richest people on the planet get together at a resort in Davos, Switzerland, and plot out the direction of the world economy without all those pesky nuisances like a democratic process or public input. And this Monday, the World Economic Forum is opening up its new headquarters in Detroit. You know Detroit, that shining model of a capitalist success story. In all seriousness, the city of Detroit is actually the perfect example of the way the capitalist system squeezes resources, people, or entire cities for every last drop of profit, only to then discard them like a used napkin when they're done. For much of the 20th century, Detroit was one of the most important cities in the American capitalist system. It was the manufacturing hub of the United States, with almost half of the country's auto workers living in and around Detroit. Through decades of militant labor struggles, the Detroit auto workers had wages that were the envy of the entire country. But by the 1980s, auto manufacturers invested billions in outsourcing and automation, replacing Detroit's auto workers with robots and cheaper labor abroad, while waging a crusade against unions at home. Working-class Detroiters who worked for decades to put cars in nearly every garage in America were left with practically nothing, as the capitalists closed down factories and redirected capital elsewhere. Today, Detroit regularly ranks as one of the poorest cities in America, suffering through not just a jobs crisis, but a water crisis and a housing crisis as well. Instead of getting what they actually need to address these problems, Detroiters are now getting the World Economic Forum, specifically something called the Global Center for Urban Transformation. They're saying they're gonna revitalize Detroit and make it a sustainable city through private investment. But did anyone in Detroit even ask for this? I spoke with several Detroit activists who've been campaigning against this project for months. If you ask the politicians or the media about why Detroit experienced the decline that it did, they might say something like, this is the way it's always been in Detroit, that it's some kind of intrinsic quality of Detroit, or that it's the people's fault that, they made the wrong choices or something like that. But what do you think is actually behind the problems that Detroit is experiencing today?
Well, that's always the answer, and you're absolutely correct in terms of that's the response. Detroiters were too stupid and couldn't figure out who to vote for mayor. Detroiters were too stupid, couldn't figure out how to avoid quote, quote, bankruptcy. Always it's the folks in Detroit, and a lot of that is around the question of color. You want to know who is at fault for all of these economic woes? It is, in fact, these corporations. And when you let these corporations get in bed with government entities and they start to scratch each other's back, it is not about helping the working people. It's never about that. It's about improving and increasing their rate of profit. And if they have to do that on the backs of my children or the backs of your children, let it be done. That's what we're talking about. So I don't live in a city that is bankrupt. I live in a city that was bankrupted.
So the center is being built under this guise of a public-private partnership. They're saying that Detroit can't overcome the challenges it's facing without private investment. Do you feel that these investors with the World Economic Forum are genuinely interested in helping out Detroit, or do you think that they're just trying to make a profit?
The ongoing crises that Detroit has experienced is because of private capital. And we don't believe that they have the solution to the problems that they created. I'm sure you're familiar with Detroit going through bankruptcy in 2013, which was really a project of dispossession in which they suspended democratic and economic sovereignty of Detroiters so they could reorganize control of resources here. And it eviscerated public education. As I think I said, they privatized the water department. We used to have a public lighting department that was completely privatized and absorbed into DTE, a private entity. Not to mention, we've been footing the bill for all of these private development projects, which have borne little fruit for everyday working class people in the city of Detroit. So no, nobody was asking for this. Nobody honestly even knew about it for the longest time. And so this is completely conceived of in boardrooms and, private meetings. There was no public discourse on this whatsoever.
That's what happens with these public-private partnership concepts. Is private money, their money, needing my money, public money, and together they're going to change the public. And that never happens. What they want are tax dollars to add to whatever their private fees are. And then with that, they're going to change things. For me, that never happens. It never happens. It sounds like the same kind of a program that plantation owners used to present and tell the slaves, look, we're going to find a way to get along. I'm the master at this plantation, and you all are the folks that pick cotton. Don't worry about that. We're going to put together a coalition, and it's going to work out just fine, not only for me, the master, but it's going to work out good for you too. How has that worked so far? It never works. And that's because the people that are in charge of the public-private entity are not the public, it's the private folks.
We view the World Economic Forum as really a center for world capitalism that includes all the major banks and financial institutions, as well as capitalist institutions worldwide. And Detroit was a city that really is the model city for austerity and the bank's attacks on the workers and oppressed people, and especially in a Black city in the US. We suffered more than really any other city by the massive foreclosure crisis precipitated by the bank's predatory lending and really criminal practices in the 2000s that led to our city having the highest, first and largest municipal bankruptcy in the history of the US. And what we believe is that the fact that they have the audacity to open up their global center for urban transformation in Detroit is to say they want to hold Detroit as the model for what the banks and finance capital want to do to cities all over the country and all over the world. And we reject that. And we're there to communicate to the world is we're not the model for urban transformation. We're the model for urban destruction by the banks and by the capitalist class. And the fact that they're actually holding this seminar and opening the office in the offices of Dan Gilbert is completely outrageous. Dan Gilbert is the owner of Quicken Loans or Rocket Mortgage. He was one of the prime foreclosures in Detroit. He wrote many of the subprime loans that led to oppressed people losing their homes in Detroit. And then he's been the biggest beneficiary of taxpayer breaks. He's gotten over $1 billion in government funds to gentrify much of downtown. And in fact, the opening of the World Economic Center is going to be in his headquarters. And the fact that this individual, who is really symbolizes gentrification and urban destruction, and really is an agent of finance capital against the people of Detroit, the fact that they hold him as their center is just indicative of what the real agenda is.
And finally, you're going up against a really formidable enemy. You're going up against some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world. What would you tell people who might say, you're fighting an uphill battle, there's no hope?
The conditions in which we are living are enough reason to take up the fight. They actually changed their launch date. And we truly believe that it had to do with they weren't expecting that type of opposition, and we put out a statement, formed a coalition, proposed an action on the day of their launch, and they took notice of that. And collective power is strong. Of course, they have all the resources, they have control of the state, but we have power in numbers. Liberation is a process of collective struggle. And if we organize and if we amass the people around opposing these policies of neoliberalism, we can win. We can. Look, there's examples of this elsewhere. Look at South America right now, what's going on there. People are winning, and so we can win here too.